Chaco Canyon Mystery. Why did they build roads to nowhere? Beneath the burning sun of the American Southwest, there lies a desert plateau where silence seems eternal. The landscape of New Mexico stretches vast and empty, carved with sandstone cliffs and canyons that echo with the voices of civilizations long gone. And in the heart of this land sits Chaco Canyon, a place that was once the center of one of the most sophisticated cultures of ancient North America. Its monumental great houses still rise from the earth like the skeletons of forgotten giants. But the greatest mystery of Chaco is not its ruins. It is the roads. From the air, they appear like scars across the desert floor, immense, straight, and wide. Some extend for miles in perfect alignment, cutting across mesas, climbing cliffs, and stretching toward the horizon with uncanny precision. They are so vast that even today they can be seen from space. And yet, many of them connect to nowhere. No towns, no villages, no obvious destinations. Just endless lines carved into stone, as if their builders were reaching not for places, but for something far beyond. Why did the Chacoans, a people who lived nearly 1,000 years ago, construct such immense highways? Roads so wide they dwarf the paths of other ancient civilizations. Roads that sometimes lead to great houses and ceremonial plazas, but just as often end abruptly at the edge of a cliff or vanish into barren desert. Were they trade routes, carrying turquoise, pottery, and exotic goods across the Southwest? Were they ritual pathways built for processions that connected the people of Chaco to the gods of their cosmos? Or were they something even stranger? Roads not to earthly destinations, but to realms of spirit, stars, and myth. This is the enigma of Chaco Canyon's superhighways, monuments of movement without clear purpose, carved by a society that left no written records to explain them. They defy logic, they defy terrain, and they defy simple answers. Some scholars call them roads to nowhere. Others believe they hold the key to understanding the very heart of Chacoan civilization. To grasp their meaning, we must first step into the world of the Chaco people, a society that flourished between the 9th and 12th centuries, building monumental architecture, engineering systems of control, and weaving networks of influence that reached hundreds of miles beyond the canyon itself. Their great houses were not mere dwellings. They were centers of ceremony, politics, and astronomy. And from these houses, the roads radiated outward like spokes from a wheel, tying the Chacoan world together. Yet these highways were not practical in the way we imagine roads today. They were too wide for simple foot traffic, too vast for the modest population of the canyon, and too ambitious for purely utilitarian use. They cut through landscapes with almost reckless precision, sometimes requiring ramps, stairways, or carved steps to cross sheer cliffs. The labor involved was staggering. Why would a society with limited tools and no draft animals commit to such monumental works, unless the act of building them carried meaning in itself? The silence of Chaco Canyon holds no easy answers. But in that silence lies the essence of its mystery. Roads that seem to go nowhere may, in fact, lead us to the heart of Chacoan belief, a worldview where earth, sky, and spirit were inseparably connected, and where movement across the land was not measured in miles, but in meaning. Tonight, we will walk those roads. We will trace their paths across desert mesas, climb with them up cliffs, and follow them as they vanish into empty horizons. We will explore the theories that seek to explain them: roads of trade, roads of power, roads of ritual, roads of the stars, and even roads that reach beyond this world. The Chacoans left no words, but they left these highways. They are questions carved into the earth, questions that challenge us to see beyond practicality and into the realm of mystery. And perhaps, in walking them, we may begin to understand not only where they led, but what they meant. The Chaco world, people of the canyon. Long before the first stones of the great roads were laid, a people chose to settle in one of the harshest environments of North America. Chaco Canyon, in what is now northwestern New Mexico, is not an obvious place to build a civilization. Rain is scarce, summers are blistering, winters are freezing, and the soil is poor. And yet, beginning around the 9th century, the Chacoans transformed this barren landscape into the heart of a world that stretched across hundreds of miles. At its peak, Chaco Canyon was a place of extraordinary ambition. Here, the Chacoans constructed massive great houses, multi-story stone complexes with hundreds of rooms, kivas, circular ceremonial chambers, and plazas designed to hold entire communities. Some of these buildings, like Pueblo Bonito, rose higher and spread wider than anything else built in North America at the time. Their walls, laid with precision stone masonry, still stand as evidence of a society capable of both vision and engineering brilliance. But the canyon was more than architecture. It was a center of life, belief, and power. Archaeologists have found evidence of goods brought from far beyond the desert: turquoise, mined in distant mountains, seashells carried from the Pacific coast, cacao beans from Central America. These were not simply items of trade. They were symbols of influence, proof that Chaco was not isolated, but part of a vast web of exchange and connection. The people themselves lived in smaller dwellings scattered across the canyon and beyond, farming maize, beans, and squash in fragile desert fields. They relied on seasonal rains and carefully managed water systems. Every harvest was precarious. Survival here was never guaranteed. And yet, out of that precariousness came a culture that built not for the moment but for eternity. Religion and ritual lay at the center of Chacoan life. The kivas, sunk into the earth, served as portals to the spiritual world. Ceremonies bound the community together, linking the struggles of survival to the powers of the cosmos. The canyon's great houses were not merely homes, they were theaters of ritual, monuments where political authority, spiritual devotion, and cosmic order intertwined. It is within this context that the roads begin to make sense, not as isolated engineering projects, but as extensions of Chaco's worldview. Just as the great houses anchored life in the canyon, the roads reached outward, tying Chaco to distant landscapes, to sacred mountains, and perhaps even to the heavens themselves. They were arteries of connection, flowing not only with people and goods, but with meaning. The Chacoans left no written records. We know them only through ruins, artifacts, and the silent patterns they inscribed into the land. Yet from these traces, a portrait emerges of a society both fragile and ambitious, one that carved permanence out of impermanence, order out of desert silence. As the 10th and 11th centuries unfolded, Chaco grew into a center of power. Its great houses expanded, its influence reached across the Four Corners region. And its roads, those immense, mysterious highways, began to spread outward, straight as arrows, cutting across mesas and valleys in ways that still defy explanation. But before we explore the roads themselves, we must ask, how could a society with stone tools, no draft animals, and no wheels build such vast networks? What methods allowed them to carve lines so wide, so straight, and so enduring into the unforgiving desert? Engineering the impossible, roads across the desert. The mystery of Chaco Canyon's roads begins with their sheer physical presence. To walk along one of these ancient paths is to step into a world that challenges logic. They are not narrow trails worn by generations of footsteps. They are monumental avenues, many measuring 30 feet wide, some extending for 50 miles or more, carved with a precision that feels almost alien in its perfection. And perhaps the most astonishing detail of all, they are almost impossibly straight. Imagine standing at the edge of one of these roads as it stretches across the desert. The line before you does not bend to follow the contours of the land. it does not meander around hills or cliffs. Instead, it marches forward, unwavering, slicing through mesas, climbing up sheer rock faces and cutting across valleys with unflinching determination. To modern eyes, accustomed to roads that twist and adapt to terrain, the Chacoan highways feel unnatural, lines of will imposed upon a landscape that resists them. How did the Chacoans, a people without wheels, draft animals, or metal tools, construct such immense roads? Archaeologists believe the process began with careful planning. Surveying the land, they placed wooden stakes into the ground at intervals, aligning them with distant landmarks or celestial points. Ropes stretched between these stakes created guides for paths that would remain arrow-straight, no matter how far they extended. The desert itself became a canvas, and the Chacoans, surveyors of astonishing skill, drew upon it with ropes and stone. To build the road, teams of workers scraped away the desert's surface layer of dark, oxidized soil, revealing the lighter earth beneath. In some places, they removed loose stones, piling them along the edges to form low embankments. In others, they deliberately leveled the ground, cutting ramps into cliff faces or carving stairways that climbed sheer canyon walls. The effort required was enormous. Consider one of the most famous examples, a road that ascends a mesa near Chaco Canyon. Instead of winding around the slope, the Chacoans carved a stairway straight into the rock, its steps leading directly upward in perfect alignment with the road below. Such feats reveal not only engineering ingenuity, but also an almost obsessive commitment to straightness, a determination that the path must follow its chosen direction, no matter what obstacles stood in its way. The durability of these roads adds another layer of wonder. 1,000 years have passed since they were last used, yet many remain visible today, etched into the desert floor. Their survival is partly due to the arid climate, which prevents vegetation from reclaiming the land. But it is also a testament to their construction. These were not casual paths of convenience. They were deliberate, monumental works, built to last. Modern archaeologists have traced more than 400 miles of roads radiating outward from Chaco Canyon, forming a network that connected dozens of outlying communities, great houses, and sacred sites. From Pueblo Bonito, the largest and most impressive of Chaco's great houses, roads spread in all directions like the spokes of a cosmic wheel. Some lead to smaller settlements where Chacoan influence was felt. Others terminate at natural landmarks, mountains, springs, or mesas believed to hold spiritual power. And still others simply vanish into the desert, ending with no apparent destination. Satellite imagery and aerial photography have revealed even more. From the sky, faint outlines of roads invisible at ground level appear like ghostly fingerprints across the landscape. Some run parallel to each other for miles. Others branch off in angles that suggest deliberate planning, as if the entire network was part of a larger vision that we can only begin to glimpse. But why build such roads in the first place? If their purpose was purely practical, transporting goods or people, why make them so wide, so straight, and so costly in labor? Why carve stairways into cliffs when a winding path would have been easier? Why insist on directness when terrain demanded compromise? These questions lie at the heart of the Chacoan enigma. To stand on one of these roads today is to feel the weight of that mystery. The desert stretches silent in every direction. The line beneath your feet is wide, straight, undeniable, yet it leads into emptiness. Was it once filled with processions of people carrying offerings, their footsteps echoing against the stone? Did traders laden with turquoise or cacao march along its length under the blistering sun? Or were the roads themselves not meant for human travelers at all, but for something symbolic, lines of connection drawn between the earthly and the divine? Archaeologists have suggested that the very act of building the roads may have been as important as their use. To gather hundreds of workers, to align stakes across miles of desert, to carve pathways into rock. These were acts of communal devotion, expressions of power and belief. The roads were not only functional, they were statements, inscriptions of authority and meaning onto the landscape. And yet, even with this understanding, the strangeness remains. Roads that defy terrain, roads that ignore practicality, roads that end in cliffs. To comprehend them fully, we must look beyond engineering and begin to explore the forces that may have motivated such ambition. Because if these highways were not built for trade or travel alone, then perhaps they were built for something greater, the movement of ideas, rituals, and power. Trade, power, and control. To understand the roads of Chaco Canyon, we must look beyond their stones and straight lines and into the networks of exchange and influence that once tied the Chacan world together. Because while some of these roads may appear to lead nowhere, many in fact connected Chaco to something far more valuable than destinations: power. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence that Chaco was not an isolated community, but the beating heart of a vast regional system. Goods from hundreds of miles away flowed into the canyon, transforming it into a hub of wealth and influence. Turquoise mined in the mountains of New Mexico, shells carried from the distant Pacific coast, copper bells and cacao imported from Mesoamerica. All of these have been discovered in Chacoan ruins. These were not the possessions of a small desert village. They were symbols of prestige, offerings of tribute, or perhaps even the spoils of a society that commanded loyalty across a vast landscape. The roads may have been arteries of this system. Straight and wide, they allowed processions of goods, people and ideas to move between the canyon and its outlying settlements. Along these routes, traders may have carried turquoise to be shaped into ornaments, shells to be transformed into jewelry, cacao to be consumed in ritual feasts. Every object carried significance. Every journey along the roads reinforced the connection between the distant communities and the canyon that stood at their center. But trade was not the only force at work here. Power itself radiated outward from Chaco Canyon. The great houses, rising high with hundreds of rooms, were not mere residences. They were monuments, symbols of authority, visible from miles away. Their size, their precision, and their alignment with the cosmos spoke of a society organized not only by survival, but by hierarchy. Within those walls, decisions were made, ceremonies conducted, and control exercised. The roads were the visible extensions of that control, projecting Chaco's influence into the desert and beyond. Imagine a community living 40 miles from the canyon. Their daily survival depended on farming, hunting, and water management. Yet over the horizon stretched a straight, unmistakable road leading directly to Chaco. To walk that road was to acknowledge the power of the canyon. It was a path of allegiance, a reminder that no matter how distant, every settlement was bound to the center. The roads were not only practical connections, they were symbols of authority carved into the land itself. This interpretation gains strength when we consider the sheer labor required to construct and maintain the roads. Building a straight line across cliffs and valleys demanded coordination, leadership, and vision. Who had the power to mobilize such effort? Likely the same elites who oversaw the construction of the great houses and the ceremonies within them. By directing labor toward roads that stretched into the horizon, they demonstrated their ability to command not just people, but landscapes. The desert itself became a canvas for their authority. Some scholars argue that the roads also played a role in ritual control. Processions along these vast avenues may have been carefully orchestrated displays of power, where communities gathered to participate in ceremonies that reinforced their bonds to Chaco. Imagine hundreds of people moving in unison along a broad, straight road, carrying offerings, chanting prayers, their steps echoing across the desert silence. Such events would not only honor the gods, but also remind every participant of the canyon's dominance. To walk the road was to walk within the order imposed by Chaco. Others suggest the roads functioned as territorial markers. By carving visible lines into the land, the Chacoans inscribed their presence onto the desert itself, broadcasting control over vast areas without the need for permanent occupation. In this view, the roads were less about travel and more about statement. They were the Chacoan equivalent of boundaries, highways of authority that declared, "This land belongs to us and to the powers we serve." Yet even with these explanations, the question lingers. The trade goods found in Chaco suggest connections across great distances, but do they explain the scale of the roads? Could such wide, monumental constructions be justified by the movement of turquoise or cacao alone? Or was there something deeper, something symbolic, that demanded the roads be built so straight, so wide, so enduring? Perhaps the answer lies in the blending of trade and ritual, power and belief. For the Chacoans, there may have been no distinction between practical and spiritual. Moving goods along the roads was not just commerce, it was ceremony. Exercising power through construction was not just politics, it was devotion. The roads embodied all of these layers at once, carrying objects, people, authority, and meaning across the desert. As we follow these highways outward, we begin to see that they were not built simply to connect places, but to weave a civilization together. They were the threads of a great web, binding distant communities to a central heart. They were symbols of order imposed upon chaos, of meaning inscribed into emptiness. And yet trade and power do not fully solve the riddle, because some roads extend far beyond the limits of practical connection. They climb cliffs where no goods could be carried. They vanish into empty desert where no settlements existed. To understand those roads, we must step beyond commerce and politics and into the realm of faith. Sacred pathways, rituals, and cosmology. If the roads of Chaco Canyon were only about trade or politics, their scale and determination would still be impressive. But many archaeologists and historians believe they were something more, something far deeper, tied not just to the movement of people and goods, but to the movement of spirit. To understand this, we must enter the realm of ritual and cosmology, where every stone, every direction, every step carried meaning. The Chacoans lived in a world where the sacred and the practical were inseparable. Crops did not grow simply because of rain. They grew because ceremonies were performed, because relationships with the spiritual world were honored, because cosmic balance was maintained. The canyon itself was not merely a geographic space. It was a sacred center, a place where the earthly and the divine intersected. Within this worldview, the roads may have functioned as ritual pathways, conduits that connected humans not only to distant settlements, but to gods, ancestors, and forces of the cosmos. Evidence for this lies in their alignments. Many of the great houses at Chaco, including the monumental Pueblo Bonito, are oriented to solar and lunar cycles. Doors, windows, and walls frame the rising and setting sun at solstices and equinoxes, or align with the 18.6-year lunar standstill, a rare celestial event. If the architecture was built with the sky in mind, why not the roads as well? Some researchers argue that certain highways extend towards sacred mountains on the horizon, peaks believed to be the dwelling places of spirits. Others connect to springs or rivers, life-giving sources of water in a desert world. In this interpretation, the roads were not random lines, but ritual journeys, leading the Chacoans from the center of their world to the sacred points that defined its boundaries. Imagine, then, a Chacoan ceremony. The community gathers at dawn, assembling in the plaza of a great house. Priests emerge from the kivas, their chants rising into the still desert air. Together, the people begin a procession, stepping onto the broad, straight road that stretches across the landscape. Their movements are slow, deliberate, synchronized. Each step is a prayer, each mile a sacrifice. As they walk, they are not simply crossing distance. They are traversing worlds, moving from the human to the divine, from the center of their community to the farthest edges of their cosmos. Archaeological evidence supports this vision. At some points along the roads, researchers have found low masonry platforms, as if designed for gatherings or rituals. Offerings such as pottery shards, shells, and food remains have been discovered at these sites. These are not the traces of ordinary travel. They are the marks of ceremony, of moments when the road itself became a sacred stage. The width of the roads also makes sense in this light. 30 feet is excessive for small groups of travelers, but ideal for processions. A wide avenue allows many people to walk side by side, transforming a journey into a performance witnessed by the gods above. The act of walking itself became ritual. The desert transformed into a living temple, with no walls and no roof, only the endless sky as canopy. The symbolism of direction adds another layer. Many roads radiate outward from Chaco Canyon like the spokes of a wheel. This radial pattern echoes a cosmological principle found across many ancient cultures, the idea of the center and the four directions. The canyon may have represented the axis mundi, the central axis of the world, while the roads extended toward the cardinal points, binding the Chacoans to the cosmic order of earth and sky. In this sense, the highways were not roads to places, but roads to meaning, paths that inscribed the structure of the universe onto the desert itself. The desert environment amplified this sacred experience. To walk for miles along a straight line in silence under the punishing sun was to enter a state of altered awareness. The monotony, the heat, the rhythm of footsteps could induce a trance-like state, transforming the procession into a spiritual journey. The destination mattered less than the act itself. The road was the ritual, and perhaps this is the key. The roads were not built for efficiency or practicality. They were built for devotion. They were acts of faith made stone, prayers stretched across the land. To carve a road that climbed a cliff or vanished into the horizon was not folly. It was reverence. It was the Chacoans inscribing their beliefs onto the world in the most permanent way they could imagine. Seen this way, the so-called roads to nowhere are not empty at all. They are filled with meaning, each step echoing with the prayers of those who once walked them. They remind us that in ancient Chaco, movement was not just physical, it was spiritual, cosmological, eternal. And yet, as compelling as this explanation is, another possibility lingers. Because if the roads aligned with sacred landscapes and mirrored the order of the cosmos, could they also have aligned with the heavens themselves? Could these highways, so straight and so enduring, have been pathways not only for processions on Earth, but for connections with the stars above? Roads to the stars. When night falls over Chaco Canyon, the silence of the desert deepens into something almost otherworldly. The air grows cold, the mesas cast long shadows under the moon, and above stretches a sky of overwhelming clarity. In this dry, high desert, far from modern light, the heavens appear in their full brilliance. Stars crowd the firmament in numbers that modern city dwellers can scarcely imagine. The Milky Way arcs overhead in a glowing band of light, and planets blaze like lanterns in the dark. For the Chacoans, this was not a backdrop. It was a living map, a cosmic stage upon which their rituals and beliefs unfolded. Archaeological studies show that the Chacoans were careful observers of the sky. Many of their great houses are oriented to solar and lunar events. At Pueblo Bonito, for instance, walls and doorways align with the solstices, marking the turning points of the year. Fajada Butte, a striking landmark near the canyon, features a famous site where slabs of rock create a sun dagger, a beam of light that pierces spirals carved into stone at key solar and lunar moments. This was no accident. It was a deliberate inscription of the heavens into the earth, proof that the Chacoans sought to synchronize human life with the rhythms of the cosmos. If their architecture was built with the sky in mind, might not their roads also have been? Some researchers suggest that the great highways of Chaco were not simply terrestrial pathways, but celestial alignments, extensions of the stars onto the desert floor. From above, the radial pattern of roads spreading from the canyon resembles a cosmic diagram, as if the canyon were the center of a wheel turning against the heavens. Certain roads appear to align with the rising or setting of the sun at solstices, or with the standstill positions of the moon, an event so rare and complex that it repeats only once every 18.6 years. To walk these roads, then, may have been to participate in a grand ritual of cosmic order, binding earth to sky, people to gods, human time to celestial eternity. Picture a procession along one of these roads at night. Torches flicker against the desert wind, their flames small against the immensity of the stars. Priests lead the way, chanting to the rhythms of drums, while the community follows in solemn steps. Above them, the Milky Way gleams, mirrored by the broad, pale line of the road beneath their feet. Each step echoes with meaning, as above, so below. The people of Chaco were not just traveling across the desert, they were traveling across the universe. This interpretation finds resonance in other ancient cultures. At Stonehenge in England, massive stones align with solstice sunrises. In Egypt, pyramids were oriented to cardinal points and constellations. Across the Americas, from the Maya to the Inca, architecture often reflected cosmic patterns. Chaco was part of this universal human impulse, the drive to inscribe the heavens onto the earth, to bring order to chaos by aligning human life with celestial cycles. But in Chaco, the scale was extraordinary. The roads did not merely point toward the sky, they embodied it. Straight lines cutting across the land were like cosmic rays, pathways that linked the people to the stars. To walk them was to participate in a journey that transcended the ordinary. The horizon became a temple wall, the desert a floor, the sky a roof, and the entire landscape transformed into a cosmic sanctuary. Skeptics caution that not every alignment is intentional. With hundreds of roads crisscrossing the landscape, some will inevitably point to astronomical events by coincidence. But even if only a few were deliberately oriented, the symbolism would have been powerful. To a people who saw gods in the sun, moon, and stars, even one road aligned to a solstice would carry immense significance. And when combined with the canyon's architecture, the evidence suggests a society deeply attuned to the heavens. The Chacoans may have believed that by aligning their world with the sky, they secured harmony with the forces that governed existence. Their roads, then, were not simply routes across the desert, but cosmic bridges, pathways to the stars themselves. And yet, even this explanation does not fully solve the mystery, because some roads remain stubbornly strange, roads that climb sheer cliffs, roads that end abruptly at canyon rims, roads that vanish into barren desert. If these were celestial alignments, why build them so impractically? Why carve pathways into stone where no traveler could walk, no goods could pass, no clear ritual could unfold? The answer may lie not in the stars above, but in realms even less tangible. Perhaps these highways were not roads of commerce, nor even roads of astronomy, but roads of spirit, paths to the beyond, built not for human feet, but for souls, roads to nowhere or roads beyond. From the very beginning of their discovery, what has puzzled archaeologists most about the Chacoan highways are those roads that seem to defy reason. Roads that rise straight up the side of mesas, only to end at sheer cliffs. Roads that stretch into the desert with no trace of a settlement at their end. Roads that stop abruptly, their lines dissolving into silence and sand. To the modern mind, these are the very definition of futility. Roads to nowhere. But perhaps that is only because we are asking the wrong questions. In our world, a road is a means to an end. It connects one place to another, reducing distance, facilitating commerce, bringing people together. But for the Chacoans, roads may have been something entirely different. They may not have been about destinations at all. They may have been about journeys. Journeys not of the body, but of the spirit. Consider a road that climbs to the top of a mesa and stops at the edge of a cliff. To us, it seems unfinished, but imagine it as the stage for ritual, a procession of people walking in solemn silence, carrying offerings, climbing upward toward the sky. At the cliff's edge, they stop, gazing out over the desert, the horizon endless before them. There, priests may have performed ceremonies, casting offerings into the abyss, prayers rising into the heavens. The road did not end at the cliff. It ended in the cosmos. Other roads, stretching into barren desert, may have served a similar purpose. They led to emptiness, because emptiness itself was sacred. In many ancient cultures, journeys into desolate landscapes symbolize journeys into the spirit world, passages from the realm of the living to the realm of the dead. Walking those endless lines, with the desert sun burning above and silence pressing in on all sides, could have been an act of transcendence. The destination was not a village or a trading post. It was a transformation of the soul. Some archaeologists suggest that these roads may have been linked to death rituals. Perhaps they were pathways for the spirits of the dead, routes by which souls traveled into the afterlife. The straightness of the roads, their refusal to bend or waver, may have reflected the directness of the journey into the next world. To walk such a road in ritual may have been to accompany the dead on their passage, ensuring that the soul did not stray, but followed the appointed path into eternity. The road's scale also supports this interpretation. If they were merely for trade, narrower paths would have sufficed. But if they were for ritual, width mattered. A broad avenue allowed entire communities to join together, transforming a simple journey into a collective act of faith. Every step, every mile, was a performance of belief, carved not only into the desert, but into the hearts of those who walked it. Modern analogies can help us understand. In many traditions, pilgrimage routes stretch for hundreds of miles. Not because the journey is efficient, but because the journey is the ritual itself. The Camino de Santiago in Spain, the pilgrimage to Mecca in Islam, the sacred trails of the Maya and Inca, these are not about reaching a destination quickly. They are about the transformation that happens along the way. The Chacoan roads may have served the same purpose, binding the community through shared movement, shared endurance, shared devotion, and perhaps there is another layer still. Some scholars propose that the roads were symbolic maps, inscribing cosmology onto the land. By building roads that led to cliffs or vanished into desert, the Chacoans may have been representing metaphysical journeys, routes to the underworld, to the sky world, to realms beyond human sight. The roads were not incomplete. They were metaphors made stone, visible expressions of beliefs we can only faintly grasp. To walk one of these roads today is to sense that possibility. The desert wind carries whispers of forgotten chants. The horizon seems eternal, stretching far beyond human understanding. The line beneath your feet, carved 1,000 years ago, speaks of purpose, but its purpose is elusive. You realize that perhaps the Chacoans did not build roads to lead somewhere. They built them to mean something, and in that realization lies the deepest mystery. For if the roads were spiritual pathways, then their true destinations are invisible to us. They may have led to the gods, to the stars, to the world of the dead, or perhaps to a vision of reality itself that we can no longer see. What to us are roads to nowhere may to the Chacoans have been the most important roads of all. The silence of Chaco Canyon. The sun sets over the desert and Chaco Canyon is swallowed in shadow. The cliffs glow red for a moment, then fade into deep purple. Slowly, silence reclaims the land. In that silence, the roads remain. Straight, unwavering, stretching across mesas and valleys, etched into stone and soil as if by the hands of giants. They are there still, 1,000 years after their builders vanished, visible from the sky, undeniable to the eye, and yet still unexplained. We have walked them tonight, tracing their paths from canyon floor to cliff top, from great houses to empty horizons. We have seen their scale, their engineering brilliance, their stubborn straightness that defies both terrain and reason. We have followed them into the realms of trade and power, where goods and influence flowed like lifeblood into Chaco. We have walked them as ritual pathways, wide enough for processions, aligned with sacred mountains and celestial cycles. We have even looked upward to the stars and wondered if these highways were cosmic bridges, tying human life to the movements of the heavens. And finally, we have stood at their abrupt endings, cliffs, deserts, silence, and asked if they were never meant for the living at all, but for spirits traveling into eternity. The answers remain elusive. Archaeologists continue to study, to map, to theorize. And yet, each explanation captures only part of the truth. The Chacoan roads are not only roads, they are symbols, mysteries, questions carved into the very earth. They remind us that not all works of humanity can be measured in practicality. Some are measured in meaning. Perhaps that is the true legacy of Chaco Canyon. A society that faced the harshness of desert life, the uncertainty of survival, and yet chose to build not only for function, but for vision. They inscribed their beliefs into stone, aligning their lives with cosmos, landscape, and eternity. Their roads may seem empty to us, but to them they were full of power, full of ritual, full of connection to forces larger than themselves. And what do they leave us? They leave us a challenge. To look beyond the surface, beyond the utilitarian, and to remember that human beings have always sought more than survival. We seek meaning. We seek connection. We seek to inscribe our place in the universe, even if only in lines of stone across a desert floor. Stand today on one of these roads, and you will feel it. The silence of the canyon wraps around you, the horizon stretches endless, and beneath your feet lies a line carved straight and true 1,000 years ago. You cannot see where it leads, but you know it leads somewhere, if not in space, then in spirit. And in that moment you understand. The mystery of Chaco Canyon's roads is not just about the Chacoans, it is about us. About our own search for purpose, our own need to build meaning into a world that often feels empty. Were they roads to nowhere? Perhaps. Or perhaps they were roads to everywhere, roads that led to gods, to stars, to ancestors, to truths beyond our comprehension. Roads that carried not bodies, but souls. Roads that remind us that the greatest journeys are not measured in miles, but in meaning. And so the silence of Chaco Canyon continues, unbroken, but for the whispers of wind across stone. The roads lie waiting, questions etched into the desert, daring us to follow. The Chacoans are gone, but their highways endure, straight, mysterious, eternal. Now the question is no longer why did they build them? The question is, what will we see in them? Were they truly roads to nowhere? Or were they, in the deepest sense, roads to eternity? Tell us in the comments below. What do you believe the Chacoan superhighways were built for? Trade, ritual, the stars, or something beyond?